So today we are still aware of everything that we've learned over the past couple of days about the Buddhist teachings about the nutriments of life. And we are returning to a teaching that we started last weekend. It's called Nourishing. It's number 46.51 in the Samyutta Nikaya. And this sutta is taking nourishing in a different sense. Instead of being the aspects of our human makeup that are processes that we inevitably will have as part of our lives that are involved with the continuation of life and the coming to birth of a new life. Instead, this sutta is teaching about the path to liberation, the path to the state of perfect freedom in relation to those processes of life, the state where at its culmination, there is no more coming to birth. So you could say that this teaching is a answer to the other teaching. Last time, we spoke about those factors which could nourish the growth and increase of the hindrances, are those factors that could denourish the hindrances, cause the hindrances to gradually become tranquilized, to shrink, and finally to disappear. And this week, we're going to go through the same sutta and look at the factors that are nourishing the factors of awakening. I just want to briefly say one or two words about the significance of the bojjhangas, or the factors of awakening. The bojjhangas are definitely things to be developed. So it's part of the fourth noble truth, the path of practice leading to the destruction of dukkha. And definitely part of the Noble Eightfold Path. It seems to be in the suttas, the bojjhangas seem to address factors that a trainee would strive to develop. In other words, long before we're even close to our noble accomplishments, our enlightenment, we may have the chance to develop these factors. In the commentary, it seems to be that the bojjhangas are treated as something that is coming immediately before enlightenment, something that comes to its full maturity and blossoming. And when all of those factors are developed, this is all the cogs in the machine are going. The factors of awakening are all in operation, then one would become enlightened. So that's in the commentary. Here's a sutta, a different sutta that says something in brief. Sir, there is one thing that when developed and cultivated fulfills four things. And these four things, when developed and cultivated, fulfill seven things. And these seven things, when developed and cultivated, fulfill two things. That's the riddle. And the answer is, the one thing is the mindfulness of breath. The four things is the four foundations of mindfulness. The seven things are the seven factors of awakening. And the two things are knowledge and freedom. For each one of these factors, there's a kind of a common refrain. Which is that each of the enlightenment factors is based on seclusion. That would be seclusion from unwholesome states of mind, dispassion, viraga, the fading away of lust and delight for sensual pleasures, and cessation, that's nirodha, the disappearance, maturing in release. So based on these two teachings, I think we could say that the factors of awakening are put into the same slot on the path of training as Sama Samadhi. So it comes after the practice of Sama Sati and before the final release, which could be the culmination of the Eightfold Noble Path. So I think when we look at these factors, we may consider how they might apply or seem to manifest in everyday life, but we would especially be thinking about how they would manifest in the process of practicing samadhi, samatha meditation, or practicing the jhana type of meditation. Now, the factors are mindfulness, investigation of dhammas, energy, mindfulness or sati, investigation or dhammavichaya, energy or virya, joy or rapture, otherwise called piti, tranquility or passaddhi, concentration, samadhi, and equanimity, upekkha. Now we can turn towards this sutta. I'm going to come back and share the screen to you so we can read the sutta together. Okay, here we go. This is the sutta. It's 46.51. In the linked discourses are the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's called the Ahara Sutta, and in English, Bhante Sujata translates as nourishing. The sutta begins at Savati. It goes right into the teaching. Mendicants, I will teach you what fuels and what starves the 5 hindrances and the 7 awakening factors. Listen. Now I'm going to skip over the hindrances because we talked about them last time and jump ahead to the awakening factor. What fuels the arising of the awakening factor of mindfulness, or when it has arisen, fully develops it? The answer is there are things that are grounds for the awakening factor of mindfulness. And the ground is called the taniya. And when you hear the word taniya, you might think of satipatthana, which is the 4 grounds given in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that is to say, the kaya, or the body, the vedana, are the 3 kinds of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. The chitta, or the 8 states of mind, or the dhamma, and within the dhamma, there's a bit of an encyclopedia of different dhamma teachings. So in particular, 2 of the items that are listed in the Dhammanupassana are the contemplation of the hindrances, which we just talked about, and the contemplation of the factors of awakening. So knowing whether there are the states that are the helpful or the hindering states, as well as the contemplation of many of the other basic factors of the teaching. So those are some of frequent, what Bandhu Sujato calls the rational application of mind. So this is the yoniso manasikara. His translation is very clever. Yoniso is a reference to the womb, or the matrix, or the source from which things arise. And so this is very often translated as a deep contemplation, or sometimes translated as the wise application of mind. Kara is making, and the manasi, so making thoughts that go down to the beginning. The translation rational, I think, has got something to do with a rational number, or some kind of a science term about a basic factor that can't be subdivided any further, going down to the basis. But for our purposes, if throughout our meditation practice, all of our formal cushion time, the time of walking meditation, the times that we're practicing mindfulness in daily life, if we have trained our mind to revert regularly, to learn how to recognize and be aware of this living body, the nature of this living body, being aware of the posture of this living body, even just being aware of what we're doing with this body. This constant a resort and reference back to the body is a way of keeping the mind in touch with reality, right? Because material form is less deceptive or less likely to go off into delusions than mental factors and mental stories. So mental stories could be completely untrue, but in a certain kind of way, the body doesn't lie. So if we train ourselves to look at the body, we can see what's really happening. Likewise, the Vedana, or the three kinds of feeling, is most useful and fruitful theme to be studied and developed, so that we have the capability of easily and quickly recognizing what type of Vedana is arising for us. So many of the dangerous or unwholesome proliferation of the mind gets triggered by contact and fueled by the arising of a strong Vedana. So then, if we can allow a pleasant feeling just to be a pleasant feeling, to be seen as it is, and stop there, we will avoid going down dangerous bypasses. But if we don't notice the Vedana, then we could be carried away before we even realize it. The Chitta are the states of mind. Is as we know, takes a bit of training to even be consciously aware and to have the discernment to be able to recognize the different states of mind. A person could have a mind which is affected by greed, or affected by anger, or affected by aversion, and not even know that this is their state of mind if they've not trained themselves on how to watch the mind. And then if we have practiced and we know the different mental states that can be experienced as the result of our meditation practice, different kinds of release of the mind through the practice of boundless loving kindness and other meditative practices, then we can come to know those states of mind as well, and to be aware of the presence or the absence of those states of mind. Just for example, so in this sequence, the four foundations of mindfulness is a kind of a starting point for the awakening factors. Being mindful of the Dhammas in the sense of the teachings of the Buddha, to my understanding, would be not that we're remembering and reciting to ourselves the lessons that we learned, but rather that we have learned and integrated those lessons, and then within our ever-changing experience, we notice that some aspect or some facet of the Dhamma is being revealed to us by what we're experiencing, either in life or what we're experiencing in the meditation practice. So we're seeing the manifestation of the Dhamma, recognizing the Dhamma within our own experience, not just having studied or recited it as something that's external to our experience. So that's the first one. So just paying attention to these factors is the recipe for causing mindfulness to grow and develop. Since Richard is here, I'll tell you that I have started to wonder whether this terrible English translation of mindfulness should be translated as consciousness. as Richard has proposed. So the awakening factor of consciousness. So if we learn how to recognize the states of the body or the nature of the body, we can be conscious of the body. If we learn how to recognize the different feelings, we can become conscious of the different feelings. If we learn how to recognize the states of mind, we can become conscious of those states of mind. So in that way, that alternative translation of sati could be a useful alternative way of thinking about it. So I'm going to appreciate Richard for a minute about that. You've raised your hand. Are you going to give an answer, Richard?
Just a slight correction. Sata, S-A-T-A, is consciousness. Sati is remembrance. And I simply brought up the point that consciousness without any kind of memory, wouldn't really work, doesn't have any value to it. It's because of memory that we understand a sequence of events, or we can learn something, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like if you're watching a movie and you were just aware, frame, but you wouldn't know who the characters were, you wouldn't know what the storyline was, you wouldn't know anything, right? So you have to have consciousness, sata, but its subset is memory, right? So that you can memorize things. But I agree with you. Mindfulness is very bad, and it was just became a popular thing that was coined by somebody, I don't know, several decades ago or something, or maybe in the end
maybe in the last century.
The last century, right? And it just caught on because it sounds kind of nice. Oh, mindfulness, you can see it's become super popular now all over the world. The word, but they're using it in all different ways, right? Anyways, not to.
I'm going to give a little. I want to give a little comment about what you said on sata. Sata is the past participle of the verb sarati, which is to remember. So then sata could mean having remembered. So are remembered. So it can, a past participle can become used as a noun, but the word sati is also derived from sarati, and it's for that reason that sati and sata are both coming from the same verbal root, that I took the liberty of experimenting with thinking of translating sati as to be conscious of something rather than the translation of mindfulness. But if one is conscious, then one has the potential to be able to remember. If you're unconscious, you won't remember it because you never knew it in the first place. Okay, so we can go ahead. Then when we have mindfulness or consciousness, and we've started to study these factors, then this fuels the awakening factor of the investigation of Dhamma, which Sujata has translated as the investigation of principles. Now, Dhamma is sometimes translated as referring to principles as in the teachings of the Buddha, or the nature of reality. And sometimes Dhamma is translated as a quality of the mind. So Dhamma comes from the root dha, which means to carry. Like our group is called the Dhamma Dharini. So we're the ones who are carrying the Dhamma. Dhamma is a phenomenon, meaning something that's able to be held in the mind, something that's able to be experienced and remembered with a conscious mind. So then, let's look at the what's the nourishment for the arising of this investigation of Dhamma? There are qualities that are skillful and unskillful, blameworthy and blameless, inferior and superior, those on the side of dark and bright. Frequent rational application of mind are frequent yoniso manasikara, wise reflection, fuels the arising of these awakening factors of investigation of principles. Now, to my mind, when I see skillful, unskillful, blameworthy, blameless, inferior, superior, that immediately makes me remember the sutta about the two kinds of thought, how the bodhisattva, before his awakening, trained himself to study whether any thought was harmful to himself, harmful to others, harmful to both, or whether it was harmless to self, harmless to others, harmless to both. And by that investigation, there comes to be this division of the potential states of mind into these two very broad categories, the harmful and the harmless, which is clearly referring to the states of mind, rather than to the systems of Dhamma teaching. I think this passage doesn't make a lot of sense if you thought that there are things that are the nature of reality, which are blameworthy, inferior, on the side of the dark. I'm not even sure what that means, unless you have some evil sorcerer who's teaching the dark magic, how to use magical curses to hurt people. But I don't think that's what the sutta is referring to. I think the sutta is just referring to being able to, having learned how to see the states of mind, having learned how to be mindfully aware, and to increase the scope of how much is falling within the realm of our full awareness, as opposed to how much we do as an automaton being oblivious to what's going on. When we're aware, then we have the opportunity to check it out before, during, and after each action, or each thought, or each word, or each action. We can say, what was the outcome? Was it harmful or harmless? And then if that's the case, then we would apply this same standard to the Dhammanupassana, the investigation of the Buddha's teachings. And we might ask, are these teachings good for us or bad for us? Are these teachings harmful to us or harmless to us? And if we got the blessing of a book or a teacher who is accurately representing the teachings of the Blessed One, I predict that you would find that it's truly fantastic that these teachings are so safe. They don't harm anyone. You could practice the Dhamma day and night, and it would not hurt you. You couldn't have too much of trying to practice according to the teachings of the Buddha, because these teachings are so profoundly on the side of what is skillful, on the side of what is blameless, on the side of what is superior, and on the side of what is bright. And so then this investigation of our states of mind while we're trying to practice according to the instructions that we received. Both helps us to develop faith or confidence in the teachings, or it also could help us to know whether we're following the path of practice in the correct way. If we're trying to follow the Buddha's teachings and it's making us miserable, then a good counselor or a good friend would say, you're got the wrong end of the snake, or you're picking up these teachings in a wrong way, because these teachings should not be harming you. And you ought to reconsider whether you've really understood them correctly, or whether you're really holding them and practicing with them in the correct way. So this is still another way that these Dhamma teachings are, it's like a self-correcting type of a system that gives us a chance to really test and know for ourselves whether or not these teachings are good. And it also is a chance, once we have got the, if we have the understanding or the belief or the confidence that these teachings basically, that they're not basically, that they're fundamentally, deeply good teachings, leading to our benefit and welfare in the truest sense, then it becomes a way of testing ourselves to see whether we are really staying on the path or whether we've fallen away from these teachings. So that's my understanding about the skillful and unskillful. I'm going to take one more and then take a pause for discussion. So then the next is what fuels the arising of the awakening factor of energy, or when it has arisen, fully develops it. And the answer is there are the elements of initiative, persistence, and exertion. This is the energy to start, the energy to continue, and the energy to go beyond, to go to the ultimate level, to exert even more energy, to like push over the top of overcoming whatever challenge or difficulty we've encountered. Now, I'm proposing that these factors seem to evolve out of each other. So once mindfulness is established, then the investigation of principles is naturally evolving out of the mindfulness. And once the investigation and testing has been done, then I'm proposing that energy would naturally evolve out of that. One of the most memorable sentences I ever heard from my teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, was in his explanation saying that investigating the Dhamma, well, you heard the teachings of the Buddha, and you check it out by seeing how it applies in your own life. And when you see that the teachings work, you say, wow, the Buddha was right. And then you feel so energetic and wanting to pursue it and wanting to really use these teachings because you found out that the teachings are right. So you got a good tool and then you want to use it. But even with that, these three ideas of initiative, persistence, and exertion would be something that could be called upon on many occasions. And I have done so very often, like if we, I guess, fell off the wagon, if our practice has gone off the path and into the ditch, if we are too distracted, too busy, too upset or something or other, and we're just like forgetting to be mindful, or we just don't want to be mindful. We just want to go and watch TV, or something like that, that we've really slipped away from the practice of these teachings, and then we got to start again. And so this factor of initiative of starting is very important. And I often think that what I find useful is to remember in my natural life on what occasions this kind of initiative naturally comes up in me, which for me, there's two different occasions when this happens. One is when my parents or my in-laws are coming to visit. I naturally want to clean the house. And the other occasion is when it's Monday through Friday and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I naturally want to start work because I spent 40 years or 35 years doing the type of work where I just would be at the office at 9 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock just start to work. And so in a strange kind of way, when we're doing something that we've never done before, developing some part of meditation that we've not really done before and we don't really know how to do it, it's having this patience to say, well, we have the procedures of meditation or the procedures of the practice that have been given to us. So just pick up this procedure and start to use it. Just the same way, when I get to work, I take, what's in the inbox, and I pick up the first piece of paper and I take care of it. And then I take the next one and take care of that. And so that's my metaphor for the energy of starting. Then the energy of persistence is like being on a long journey and not giving up the journey without reaching the destination. And the energy of exertion is when the metaphor for me is when there is some challenge, some hurdle, some difficulty. It could be like in terms of practice, there's some deeply ingrained habits of the mind that may be coming, from deep in our childhood, or even from birth. We had certain kinds of character. Who knows? I can't say what it would be for any person, but something that's a really deeply embedded formation or habit of the mind, which is hard to even see because we've just carried it habitually for so long. And knowing that this pattern is counterproductive and an obstacle to our success, we must be able to overcome it. And so then you'd need that kind of like heroic energy to overcome it. And so then I tried to remember, whatever seems to be like the most heroic thing I ever did in my natural life, and what that energy felt like when I was just called on to overcome fear, overcome hesitation, overcome danger, to just push through a situation. So then there's a way in which this virya, this energy, is coming up naturally because of the investigation, and there's a way that then we need to, once it's come along naturally, we need to nourish and protect it to make it to be sustained and to grow. The next three factors are more more clearly and deeply getting into sama samadhi. I thought I'd pause here for a second. See, are there any questions or comments so far about these first three factors and how if you want this factor to be stabilized for you, how you would nourish this factor in your practice? Okay, Richard.
Thank you. I agree with you that these 7 bhujangas are a kind of like a development cycle. So after one attains right effort, the 6th factor on the path, Buddha says right effort is to understand, what is wholesome and what is unwholesome and like that. So then one moves on to mindfulness, to attain right mindfulness. And in the process of attaining right mindfulness, one has to overcome the 5 hindrances. So keep in mind that mindfulness it culminates in the 4th jhana. Buddha says when you attain equanimity, that is purity of mindfulness. So in order to attain right mindfulness, you have to pass by these hindrances, and those hindrances are where he's saying investigation of principles here.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is you're trying to set aside those hindrances. And if you're capable of setting them aside, I know in my own experience when I'm meditating, initially my mind might be a little unwieldy and stuff like that. But at a certain point, it usually takes about a half an hour for me. It can be more or less. Suddenly my mind will settle down and I'll be able to focus much better. And it's like a clarity opens up and the hindrances are sort of gone. And at that point, I feel very, I think in the Sutta translation, you would say glad, that, okay, now the path is open, you know what I mean? And I feel like a strength and an energy, that comes up, and that's the next one, the next of the bhujangas, right? The awakening of energy. I feel like I'm very peaceful and everything, but I feel like a strength and an energy that, okay, now I'm going to start, really, pushing forward. And so the next one, I don't want to go too far, but just to show you the pattern, joy, right, arises next in the 1st jhana. And then you'll see that rising of each one follows the jhana pattern after that. Right. So anyways, that's just, an insight I wanted to give. And other people, I'm sure, probably have much better meditation, other things than I do, but or accomplishments, I should say. But anyway, that's the way I see it. So yeah, I agree with you that this is kind of a building process here.
Thank you. I'm going to take a comment from Samanera Satima.
Thank you, Aya. It's more of a comment / question. I think I keep hearing the 8 factors of the Eightfold Path as if it's sequential. Like first you do this and then you do that. And I'm sure Richard didn't necessarily mean you develop right effort and then you go on to develop mindfulness and then you go on to develop. I mean, it's just not my experience of how the factors work. And I'm no expert by any stretch, but I just wonder if you had a thought about, for me, it just feels more natural, like if you were putting some clothes in a washing machine and you hit start, there's a certain cycle that runs. First you wash and then it spins and then you rinse and then you spins. And if you don't interrupt the cycle, it'll finish. So for me, when I sit, I notice the mind goes from like not with any effort, it's just like it goes from one level, and then if I don't interrupt it, or if a hindrance doesn't interrupt it, it just like, it just goes to the next level, and then it just goes sort of automatically. So I just wanted to check out something Richard said about first you develop this and then you develop that. Whereas in my experience, it's like a cycle that just happens if not interrupted.
It may be difficult to remember how it was before we had gained wisdom, or before we knew how to gain seclusion from the hindrances. My understanding is that an untaught ordinary person would first learn about a basic right view, just in terms of causality and karma. And when you say knowing that there's mother and father, that there's enlightened persons, knowing about rebirth, just those basic factors, and then developing this global right intention about wishing for to be free from greed, free from aversion, free from cruelty. And then from developing that wish, then with the steps relating to the right action and right livelihood, that one has got the basic principles by which to live one's life, which facilitate, actualizing those wishes. But even a person who's gone so far along the noble path is not yet very close to real liberation, because despite all of their efforts to have these nice intentions and to be practicing a good morality, it would be possible that internally their mind could be quite like dirty and distorted and emotional and filled with all kinds of negativities. And so then the step of the right effort is when we realize that just externally taking care of our behavior and livelihood doesn't do the job. We have to go inside and take care of the mind. That's the reason why I think in the Eightfold Path, the effort comes first before the sati, whereas in the Bojjhangas, it's a different sequence. So then one would look inside and look at what's the starting point of all of our mistakes, and to try to discover how to get out of those negative mental patterns, and discover how that we have the capacity for these positive mental patterns, and discover that we've got the agency that we can choose wholesome states of mind, and finding that it's possible to choose those wholesome states, then we can choose to stabilize and develop and perfect them. So then, but then all of this effort, the right effort, is my point on the Noble Eightfold Path, is still it's got this duality of suppressing and abandoning and relinquishing the things that are harmful, and favoring and developing the things that are skillful. Then it does seem to me that the moving from that up to sati, there's a certain relaxation. I'm sorry, I should come around. There's a certain relaxation of that dualistic judgmental quality. And when you're really just being mindful, whether it's good or bad, you need to know it. You need to see it. You need to understand it. And you can't kill it first and understand it second. You have to be able to see it first and understand it before you're able to truly cause it to evaporate or truly gain seclusion. So at that level, the aspect of samasati, which is popularly taught in the West as being non-judgmental awareness, which is equally able to direct mindfulness towards the wholesome state or the unwholesome state or anything that can arise. It's all a suitable object or a topic for mindful awareness. So then there's some kind of a process where the combination of the right effort that is ready to abandon and denourish the hindrances and the negativities in combination with the mindfulness, which is able to, with completely open eyes to see things as they actually are. That's what creates the possibility for the hindrances and the negativities to really be eliminated. It's like if you try to eliminate something by force, it causes like a repercussion, and the thing that you're trying to suppress is coming back even stronger. But when it's got the combination with this full awareness, it's able to like disappear almost of its own accord, just by virtue of seeing and understanding. Like if you understand this is good medicine, or if you understand this is poison, then it's sort of natural that the mind goes towards health or towards then from there we're into the state of being secluded from sensual desire and secluded from unwholesome states of mind, and in the samadhi. There was another hand. Sheila, did you have a hand up?
I did, but in your responses to recently, my question was answered, or comment, so thank you. I do have one as we get to rapture, though.
Okay, so let's go ahead to the next set. So what fuels the arising of the awakening factor of rapture, or when it has arisen, fully develops it? There are things that are grounds for the awakening factor of rapture. Now, rapture here is piety. There's no good translation for piety, so we can't have a good word for it. We might as well use rapture. Frequent rational application of mind to them fuels the arising of the awakening factor of rapture. Now, we associate piety with the first jhana, and so then the supporting factors for entering into first jhana would be the supporting factors for the arising of rapture. That is to say, the seclusion from sense desire, seclusion from unwholesome states of mind. Elsewhere, I looked around to see what some experts say about piety. So piety is said to be a joyful sankhara, a mental formation. In other words, it's not a kind of a feeling. It's not a vedana. It's a state of mind. It's associated with no object. So remember, we've been studying how consciousness can grasp after objects and get stuck into objects, or how so many of our thought processes, craving and clinging, are so naturally involved with this process of reaching after objects. And so this is, I think, a very our unique and distinctive way of recognizing what is piety versus what is pleasure, is that it's not connected with having or delighting in a pleasant object. In the Patana, that's part of the Abhidhamma, it has the two meanings of joy and interest. So sometimes we see piti as being translated as joyful interest. And it's said that it counteracts the hindrance of malice. So that's what I can say about piety. To my understanding, the factors that are the basis for piety are as what's specifically what's okay. There's two kinds of piety. In the first jhana, you have piety that's arising from this seclusion from sensual desire, seclusion from unwholesome states of mind, and then in the second jhana, you have piety, which is arising from the unification of the mind. So where the mind is not distracted or scattered, but all of the aspects of mentality are able to be joined together into the practice of meditation, so that the meditation doesn't have that quality of restlessness. So nourishing those qualities would be the way to nourish the arising of piety. And I would invite, let's talk further about piety, see if anybody has anything to say about that, your experiences with it, or what you have learned, or what you have read and applied in your own practice about piety. I did take a course from Bhante Sujato years ago about the practice of loving kindness. And he spent the longest amount of time focusing on discovering the hindrances to loving kindness and working with each hindrance. You had to kind of test yourself. So you had to really prove that you've really overcome the hindrances to loving kindness for your dear one, for the neutral person, or for the enemy, or for yourself. And so that you thoroughly become completely able to generate loving kindness towards any one of those people with no hindrance whatsoever, that you can do it on the spot without any hesitation. And you can do it reliably whenever you want to. You can generate because you have overcome all of those hindrances. And only after having passed that course and kind of given yourself a diploma because you know you can do it, then he says, then it's the time to break out of that form and allow the loving kindness to go in all directions without bounds. And that's when the piety can arise, because actually you've done a lot of work to understand and overcome the hindrances. So I'll call on Patipada.
Thank you, Aya. So understanding, I took a course from Catherine, and my understanding is that, well, like you said, it is not a feeling and it is not a sensation. It is just something that arises. And from the teachings that you had over the weekend, when you were focusing on mental constructs, that's where I remember it being mentioned within that category. So what you're talking about, the test, for me, the test was, with all of the things I've shared with you happening with me growing up, to be able to bring those faces to my mind and to be able to have no animosity and no hatred and no anger arise with those faces. And the first time that happened is when I was at the monastery in February this year. And it was the most amazing thing, because with that arose a message saying no one has done anything to anyone. So it was quite a powerful experience, but it still isn't one that I can fully explain, because the words that come to mind to experience happiness and joy and all of these things, there's still an external point of contact to generate the feeling and the sensations. But there was no contact. There was nothing. So it is a very difficult thing to explain.
Mm-hmm.
There doesn't seem to be a process like the point of contact in the senses to generate what PT is, because it does not work that way. Anyway, I can't come up with the words. I'm sorry.
Thank you. The metaphor that you or the example that you've given is actually very much on the point. And so then it's not that we try to experience PET, but then the PET is arising because of something else. It's arising out of this process of letting go completely
Right.
all the resentments or all of the formations we have in that particular context or towards any context.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
You know how you say sometimes you forget to be angry, you forget to be.
Yes.
Like, possibly that in those times when you.
I was saying, is it possible that one forgets to be angry? And
No, it isn't about forgetting.
No,
it's just not
it's-
there. It
yeah.
just doesn't arise.
no, I think it's more powerful than that.
Yeah, it's not about memory.
Yeah. No, it's something more intentional than that, and more positive than that. This thing about how the negative and positive emotions sort of like come and go by themselves. And so in that way, a person who has not yet learned how to really step out of their negativities, just because of impermanence, eventually the wheel turns and you're not in the negativity, and you may find that from time to time you get to be in a positive state of mind just because of the flow of impermanence. And that's good to know. But then that's not the same thing as being able to have this transformation of consciousness because of discovering that actually it's nobody's fault. Our or something like that. And I know
There-
that
yes,
yeah.
exactly. There's nobody there.
Mhm.
Nobody has been wronged, and there's no victim and there's no perpetrator.
Right.
None of that exists.
Right.
And to be able to experience
Hmm.
one's history that way
Yeah.
is just, yeah, it's difficult to explain. I'm sorry, I'll stop now because what I'm
Right.
trying to do seems to be futile.
I am aware of the time, and I was planning to go through this whole sutta in one day. We can always carry it on to another week and spend an entire week just talking about Pija and Pasadi. It would be worth it. Those are good topics. So I don't mind. But in any case, I am going to be stopping at approximately at 2:30 and starting to wrap this up, and we can continue next time. Now, having said those things, does that mean that Sheila and Richard are putting their hands down so that we can go into Pasadi? Richard.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying that you were gonna save the next topics for later.
I'm
But,
going to,
I did want to address one thing.
yes,
The nun that spoke up and she mentioned my name. I'm sorry, I'm old and I forget names easily. So I don't, if someone could
that
tell
was
me her name, I'd actually get down.
Satima,
Satima.
Samaneri Satima. Yes, she
Okay.
appreciates you very much, Richard. So,
I appreciate her too. So, but what I mean is that there's a doctrine in Theravada based on the idea of sila, samadhi, and panna, which sila is usually translated as morality, but really it means habit. So there's susila and dusila. You can find those words in the sutta. So susila means good habit, dusila means bad habit. So samadhi brings you up to full concentration. When you have right samadhi, it means you've perfected at least the fourth jhana. And panna is usually translated as wisdom, but a synonym for wisdom is understanding. And I like the word understanding better because the word wisdom in Western culture has a kind of biblical connotation, like the wisdom of Solomon, like God gave Solomon a special magic ability, you know what I mean? He endowed him with this so that he could be wiser than other men or something, because he wanted him to be the king, you know? So I kind of avoid that word wisdom, and I prefer understanding, because that's really what we're getting when we're studying Buddha. We're getting understanding. So in Majjhima Nikaya, number 44, the Chula Videla Sutta,
mhm.
You have Vishaka asking questions of oh, sorry, forgetting her name now.
Damadina.
Damadina, yeah. And one of the points she divides the path into these different parts. You know, certain parts fall under sila, and certain parts fall under samadhi, and certain parts fall under wisdom. But that's because it's a limited activity going on between the two, and it's actually this is actually a pattern. So there's the uneducated worldling. Buddha says you have to at least be an educated worldling to get an idea of why this Dhamma, why what the Tathagata is teaching, you know, might be the correct way. And so that's wisdom, that's panna. To have that education is the first level of wisdom, right? And so from that beginning level of a follower, you get the confidence follower, and the confidence follower takes the 5 precepts. So you have wisdom, sila, and then the Dhamma follower focuses, and Buddha says this is a type of concentration. He focuses very much on the Dharma. So he's doing samadhi, and when he gets his breakthrough, and he comes to Sotapan, that's wisdom. Okay, he gets understanding, and that understanding culminates in right view. Okay, so that's why that's wisdom factor there. Then again, he starts applying the next four principles, right? And those four principles are again, he starts Sila over again. Okay, and then from Sila he goes to the last four. I'm sorry, the last three parts of the path, and those are samadhi, and then it culminates again in arahatship, and that's wisdom again, that understanding. So it's a pattern that's going on, but a misunderstanding of this pattern came in because in this conversation with Dhammadina, it was just describing just this limited part. Well, what about these parts of the path? And so people developed the wrong idea. And so they think that, oh, well, right view will come after I do all the sila, after I do all the samadhi, because wisdom comes at the end, right? But no, Buddha says over and over again, first you have to come to right view to step on the path, because there's the mundane path for pre-sotapans. And then once you hit sotapan, you become a noble disciple, and then it becomes the noble path. And then when you attain arahatship, it becomes like the transcendental path. And that's why they add two more factors onto the path, right?
Yes.
And that brings you to arahatship. So
Yes.
Anyways, I don't want to be overcomplicated, but it's and nobody needs to accept what I say, but I think if you think about it and you'll see the pattern going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Anyway,
Thank you.
That's what I want to say.
Richard, you might, if you recall Bhikkhu Bodhi's lecture on the Chula Vedala Sutta, you may remember that he said this is the only place in the entire Tipitaka where the Eightfold Noble Path is divided in that way among Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. And yet it's so weird that every time a student or a child in Buddhism school, Buddhist Sunday school, or a student who's a beginner in Buddhism, they always teach that the path is divided into Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And it only appears in this one sutta in exactly that specific way. So the cyclical nature, and indeed what I was describing earlier on about the path was describing the putujana, or the ordinary common uneducated person, how they would experience using the path to crawl out of their initial depths of their neurotic suffering. And then there's the level of the trainee, the noble path that's cultivated by the trainee, and then at that point the right view at that level is the understanding of the Four Noble Truths and of the three marks of existence that becomes foundational for the further development. And then for the noble one, this is what the Buddha said: even after his awakening, he continues to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. So the noble path doesn't even stop when one has reached the goal, but this is how we continue to live, how we continue to practice. And that when it becomes the tenfold path, after Sama Samadhi, the eighth factor is freedom or liberation. So the ninth factor is freedom or liberation. And the 10th factor is the knowledge of liberation. We've come up to 2:30, and we shall have to come back again next week and discuss passaddhi, or tranquility. So we'll have a chance to carry on with this sutta for another week. I appreciate everybody's patient listening, and I appreciate your practice, your willingness to talk, and your willingness and courage to ask questions and to share from your personal experience. All of these things means that we can help each other to learn and to grow in the Dhamma. So now we can pay respects to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. I'll see you again maybe on Tuesday.
Thank you, Aya.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sadhu.
Patipada, I will try to answer you later about this last question you put in.